welcome to Bites by Nancy Moomba. Today we're making a classic sponge cake, really simple, nothing too fancy, just basic ingredients that you have in your kitchen. So I have here some butter. You can use stock or margarine or any vegan fat that's out there. That's 200 grams of that. I've got some sugar, 200 grams of sugar as well in there. I've got some self-raising flour. You can guess the amount. That's 200 grams. We've got a theme going here. I've got some eggs. So we're going to use 4 eggs. We tend to use 50 gram per egg. So because I've got 200 grams, so I'm going to use 4 eggs. And I also have a spatula here. Very important too. I've got the 2 cake tins here, and we're going to grease these together so that I can show you the easier way of greasing baking tins without you having sticky cake in your baking tins. They are 5-inch cake tins, but 12 centimeters if you get it from the supermarket, because they tend to label them in centimeters. They are quite small, but you can scale the recipe up and use bigger tins if you need to. I've got some vanilla extract there. That's also obviously flavors your cake. That's it for our ingredients. Like I said, it's just a basic, lovely sponge cake. Okay then, let's get baking. So the first thing we're going to do is to make this beautiful, simple sponge cake is we're going to preheat our oven. So I've got a fan oven, and usually when you've got a fan oven, your temperature is a little lower than somebody with a convection oven, which is a normal traditional oven without the fan. So for my fan oven, I'll put my oven at 170 degrees Celsius, quite low because your cakes bake better that way. And then if you've got a traditional or convection oven, that will be about 170 degrees Celsius. Don't go up to 180 because your sponge is gonna bake too quick and you don't get the rise that you need from it. So I'll turn mine on to 160, my fan oven. There you go. And the best place to place your cake is the middle shelf. So if you've got a few shelves in your oven, always make sure it's right in the middle. No pans, nothing, just air circulating. So let's get into it then. I'll get my mixer. So I've got my mixer here now, and I'll get my scales. The best ones are the digital ones. The old-fashioned scale that we had, not very 2022, not very current, but if that's what works for you, that's fine. But the good thing with these is you can just keep pressing 0 with your ball on the top with other ingredients in, and each time you press 0, it's like you're starting again, so you can add more measurements to that. So that's brilliant. I like that for that. So I'll just measure, just for the sake of the video, even though I've pre-measured. And so this bowl is about 2 kilos, but I've just pressed the 0 button, and that's like a clean slate. This is what I like about this. Very important, spatula. Actually, each time I think of a spatula, when we were young, we didn't have these spatulas, so that meant you had more left over in the bowl and you'd lick what's left over. But my kids hated because these just scrape everything out completely. You don't have anything left when you're using them. Anyway, so that's my my butter. You can use stock. I know with stock the cakes come out a lot fluffier than with butter because it's got vegetable oil in it. I do like the taste of a buttery sponge though. So that's 200 grams. And then I'll press my 0 button, which is great. So that's like starting again. And then I'll add my sugar in. Granulated sugar, because it does the same thing. The only trick to this is beat it for longer and make sure your mixture is pale. And if you wanted to make your own caster sugar, just grind it in your blender or something, and you still get the same result. That's going in. Start low and then go higher so that you don't have sugar splattering everywhere, unless you've got one of those fancy shields for your mixer. And if you're doing this by hand, do what I did when I was young. Just pass it around the whole house, you know, put it in a little bowl with your wooden spoon and just let everybody mix until you have it pale. That still works. So nice and slow. Then when our sugar mixes, then we go higher up. The other thing is, as you are mixing, especially with, this is a really big bowl, and because I'm a professional baker, I usually do big batches. So with a smaller batch, you tend to have your butter and sugar going in the sides. Again, that's how this comes in handy. You literally just scrape the sides and then let it start again. So we'll do that. Back in. That's it. So the other thing I need you to take note of before we get further with our mix is, it's got a very yellowy color at the moment, which is the color of the butter. But when you're done mixing, we want it nice and pale. So a nice off-white, you know, creamy color. But this is more like a yellowy, orangey. So we want it a lot more pale. So if your mix is still looking like this, and if it's still quite sort of sticking together and hard, you want to go a bit more. And I think a lot of people tend to stop here. But what I'm saying to you is, let's go a bit further, and that will give you a very good sponge. It's ready now. That's been about 10 minutes. I think also, depending on how much mix you have, so the more you have, the less time for some reason, because the mixer has got more to deal with, and it rubs against each other. But because this was only 200 grams of each, the butter and the sugar, it just seems to taken a little bit longer. And there you have it. So it's just sort of like falling off more or less easily. That's what you want, and it's got a really pale color. So what we'll do now is we'll start adding our eggs. So we'll now add the eggs. It's best to add the eggs 1 egg at a time. And I've got my eggs here, and I'll use my bowl. It's also best to break them in a bowl. I tend to just break them as I go, but when you get a rotten egg, that means your whole mixture is gone. So the little tip I'll give is, use your little bowl, and then each time you keep adding. And if your mixture starts to look curdly, like a sour milk mixture, just add in a teaspoon of flour, or just keep going. I tend to just keep going and then add your flour as you would in the end. It usually corrects itself. I know a lot of people panic and they say keep adding flour, but you still get a sponge at the end of it all. So let's get going. So we'll have the mixture going, and then we'll be adding eggs as it goes, so that we don't stop. We keep that momentum going. So I just increased it there so that the egg can mix before I add the next one. That's quite important. . So this is what I meant. So we're getting like a curdle now. But this is good that this is happening. This is good so that, you know, we're troubleshooting together. This just means that we can then correct this situation. So other people would say add a teaspoon of flour, a tablespoon of flour. You can do that if you want, but you're still gonna get a sponge at the end of the day. So I'll just add in the next egg and I'll let that going. This is the third egg. Remember, I'm only adding 4. So I'll show you what the curdled mixture looks like, and I'm glad this is happening because we can troubleshoot this together. There we go. I don't want this to drip on my stand mixer, so this is a little trick again. Lots of tricks today. See? So that's what that looks like. It's got like a curdly texture to it, like baby sick. Sorry, don't say that when cooking, do you? Sour milk, yeah, sour milk. Most bakers would say add a little bit of, that's why I've got a little spoon. You can add a spoon of flour to like rectify that, or you can ignore it like I do. Just carry on. You're still gonna get a sponge at the end of it all. But I do realize not everybody's an experienced baker, so you could always just add flour from your already measured mixture. You don't add, you know, more flour. So maybe I should add flour so that you see how to rectify it actually. I think that's before we add our last egg. I think I'll do that. So I'll add a tablespoon of flour. And then we'll see how it looks, how it should look like if it's not curdled. This better work. Work a little bit, but you get the gist. So I'll move it out so you can see. You could do it, I could have done with adding a bit more, but you can see that it's correcting it. And then we'll just carry on with the last egg. I tend not to do it because you still get a sponge at the end of it all, unless you're making something like a Genoese sponge. Ooh, big words. Then you worry about, you know, that sort of stuff. But if it's just a classic simple sponge, we should be okay. Last egg. As I'm mixing, I can even see the difference now between the previous mix to this, because that curdled so much. This is a lot better because of that tablespoon of flour I added. Before we add the flour, we're gonna add our vanilla extract. I tend to add a little bit more, and if you can get the good expensive one, that's even better to add more taste to your sponge. I'm gonna squirt it in, but you don't have to do what I'm doing. This will be about 2 teaspoons. I'd say, for this mixture. So we're saying that's about 2 teaspoons. You can use an actual teaspoon to measure, don't do what I'm doing. I feel like the vanilla mixes better with when it's in with the eggs, because it's still quite a liquid consistency. And then we're gonna just so this is pre-measured flour. This is 200 self-raising flour. This is 200. Some people will add maybe a teaspoon or half a teaspoon of baking powder to their self-raising flour. I tend not to. Remember, we're making a simple sponge cake. So I'll just sift that in, and notice what I've done, just so that I don't have all this dripping on my stand mixer. It's just a little hint that usually stays there. Watch it not stay now because I'm showing you filming, but yeah, that's fine there. I'll get my very important sieve, and then let's get sifting. So that's our 200 grams of self-raising flour. Also, just take note that that's adding to the weight of your bowl. So you just press 0 again if you're using these electronic scales and start again. It's really clever actually. That you can keep adding ingredients and just pressing the 0 button and the scale just picks it up from there. That's it. We've got everything in now. If you do get, sometimes you do get little bits there. If it's just flour, I just tend to, you know, but if it's something else like little hard, you know, grainy, then you make sure they don't go in your cake. Put that away. And then we mix again. So easy. That's our cake done. If your mixer has a stir setting like mine does, just put it on stir. That means the flour won't go all over. Otherwise you're gonna have a flour bath. Be covered everywhere in flour dust. And also because it's a sponge, you don't want to overmix it because we still want to keep that air in. So we want that nice folding action, which is what my mixer is doing. We won't go very high speed here. This is literally taking a few seconds, and the rest I'll use my spatula to do with. And notice how the mixture is just falling, you know, into the bowl. That's a really good cake mix, that. And I'll get it out so that you can all see it. I'll just get the sides out, scrape every bit. Look at that. That's our batter. That's our sponge. That's our very easy classic sponge. I've not added any milk to this because for a proper sponge you don't really need milk. I know a lot of people tend to, but I find that the sponge hardens when you add milk, unless you add really small amounts, a tablespoon, but you really don't need it. You don't need any more dairy than there is in here. And that's it. That's ready to go in our baking tins now. So we're going to grease our cake tins now, and we're using very soft, as you can see, very soft butter or stalk, if that's what you're using for your cake. If it's a bit on the hard side, you just pop it in the microwave for just a few seconds until you get it really soft, because we want to spread this in our cake tins. Or I know there's some people that don't have microwaves. You can just carefully pop your maybe oven-proof little dish like mine in the oven for just a few minutes, a minute maybe, or less, 30 seconds maybe, just to get it nice and soft so that you can use it to grease your cake tin. The other thing I need to mention to you is I've got a really fancy Nancy oven thermometer, and that just means I know the exact temperature of my oven. Other people don't need to know that, but you need to know your oven as well. So this cake mix will take about half an hour. So let's grease those tins then. So just, I'm using a brush. You can use your hands, you can use whatever you want. Clean hands, always. And I'm just brushing that in. And I'm putting quite a lot. This makes all the difference, you know. Be generous with it. I think that's the word, generous. There you go. You can also use parchment strips or parchment paper. They tend to be a bit more expensive though. So a second one. I'll use 2 so that we can sandwich this cake. You could also use 1 because it's not a lot, one bigger cake tin, because it's not a big mix. But this is just for the purposes of us doing this together. you go. No particular way of doing it, as long as you get your butter on literally every spot. There you go. And then what I'll do next, this is where the magic is. That's just a little bit of my self-raising flour. This wasn't part of the measurement to the cake. This was just something different. You just pop a bit in, and you literally just put it around your, just like little, you know, movements all around. Get it all in. The base especially, because that's what usually attaches to the pan. And you do the same with the other one. I would say about a teaspoon for this, but if you're using a bigger cake tin, obviously, you'd use more. And I'll just show that to you. Just gently. I tend to do the sides as well. It just means your cake is just gonna come out just so easily. There's a saying about like butter on a knife. I want to say that, but I don't know how to say that. What's that saying again? Like butter off a hot knife. I knew that was the saying. Oh gosh. Anyway, yeah. So there we go. So we've got a dusting of flour there. That makes all the difference. That's it. We're ready now to put our mix in. I'm going a little bit over the top here, and if you like things done really simple, you can maybe just use your spatula, and you can measure each tin, like how many spatulas you put in. But I make professional cakes as well, so when I want my layers to be even, I'll use my scale. You don't have to, but it's a good idea if you want nice even layers, especially if you're not icing your cake. So I'll put my and let's see if the maths adds up, because we've added that many ingredients in there. I'll put my scale there, and that's on 0. So I'll just put the same amounts in both cake tins so that you get an even amount. That means your layers will be even. So that's 390 grams in there for now, because if I have leftover, I'll go back to it and I'll zero that. And because these are the same, sometimes you don't need to zero because they're weighing the same, they're from the same company. Sometimes if I add it on my scale, it just goes straight to 0, but it didn't for me that time, but it usually does. So I'm hoping I can get 390 out of this as well, which I think I will. She says. Yeah, I'm good. I've got 380. Oh, okay, not that good. 398 in there. I don't think it makes a difference when you got just a few grams anyway. Yeah, put the rest in that one. You see, this is what I was saying. When I was young, we didn't have these spatulas. You just had like, I'm gonna say in Africa, but I think when I've asked my British friends, they didn't have the fancy spatulas as well. You just use like a normal wooden spoon, and then you use that to get your mix out. That meant there was loads of leftover for the kids, and you'd all be sat there, you know, after the cake's gone in. But look at what that does. It literally takes it. Good for you, the baker, but not good for the little ones waiting to lick the bowl, unless you intentionally leave some for them. Anyway, back to the topic. So we've got our even mixture in there. Sometimes you have a dome when you make your cake. I tend to just sort of make sure that I put my mix to the side to avoid that, and I pretty much tend to get even layers. You don't have to if you're not bothered about that. Just something like that. Do the same. That's it. There we go. And that's going in the oven. 160 for my fan oven, 170 if you've got a traditional convection oven, and it should be about half an hour for this mix. If you've got obviously a bigger mix, bigger cake tin, the depth as well matters, you know, how much you've put in, then it will be more time. The other thing I was going to say was also know your oven. You have to make sure you know your oven. Even if you're not a professional baker, you just try and get to know your oven, because ovens can have hot spots as well. You know, if you put it on this angle, it doesn't cook as well as that angle. So try and get to know your oven. That's it. Let's put that in the oven. So the cakes are ready now. It's been about 45 minutes, not 30. Like I said, know your oven. So we're gonna just check. I've got 3 skewers here in front of me, and this is just to show you what you can use. So if you don't have any of these, that's the fancy one with the cupcake. Look at that. If you don't have any of these, you can just use your normal cocktail stick skewers, just the normal skewers that you'd use for, you know, like barbecue meat. That's one you buy as well. And notice how that's long, because if you've got a deeper cake, you need that in, and be careful not to burn. So let's get those cakes out the oven, but I'll just show you what it should look like when it's ready. So we'll just have a look and just check that these are ready. I've got my 3 skewers here. We use all 3. That one's got a little thing that I used to pull the cakes in. So handy. That's ready, nothing on there. And we'll try this on the other one. So we'll check this one using the other skewer. You can do a little twisty action as well to just make sure. So that's about clean. There's still little tiny bits there, but you need to bear in mind that the sponge still cooks when you take it out, because the pans are really hot. So that should be fine. And you've got a bouncy action as well. That's perfect. But look at how lovely they look. We've got some air bubbles there because it's a sponge, it's got air, but also nice color, and we don't have a big dome in the middle because we did that sorting out earlier. If you remember, we moved this the dough to the side, or the butter. You call it butter for cakes. We moved the BATTER. We call it butter for cake. So we moved the butter to the sides of the tin. That just means I don't have a really massive big dome in the middle, because sometimes you waste and have to chop that off. So there we go. There we have it. We have to wait for these to cool a good 10-15 minutes before we tip them over. But the other thing I'll show you is, look at the cake coming off the edges of the cake tin. That's what sponge does when it's cooked. It just means it's really cooked. So you can see it's coming away. There's a little gap between the edge of the tin and the cake. There we have it. So we'll let that cool for a few minutes. The other thing I forgot to mention was, when the cakes are in the oven, during the time the cake is baking, don't open the oven prematurely. So if you're, let's say, baking for 45 minutes, wait until the very end, because if you do open it, you let air in and your cake will sink. That's how you have like a sunken cake. And then after that, they are really difficult to cook once that happens. So there you have it. Our lovely sponge cake, just being left to cool now. Okay, so our sponge cakes have been out of the oven for about 10 minutes. You can leave them out longer if you need to. And I'll just show you, I've got one that I've loosened out already. And I'll show you how easy that one is. I hope this is the right one, because they're identical. So that's literally just popping out. Look at that. And that's our lovely sponge. And I'm obviously using a wire rack. And I tend to leave them cooling in this position. And a lot of times, if you've got even a little dome, it flattens out because you've left them, you know, upside down. So that's our sponge. That's very nice. Then I'll show you now how to loosen it. So that one is the one that I didn't loosen. So look, that's upside down and that's not coming out. That doesn't mean it's stuck, because look at how nicely that one's come out. So we'll try and get the other one out. For this one, I've got a spoon. You can use a knife, but I prefer something with a rounded edge, something not too sharp, because you don't want to damage your cake. It's still delicate whilst it's in the tin. So I'll only do a small part of the cake with a spoon, and I'll just wiggle the other part. This is really not necessary if you've greased the pan like I showed you, but in case it's a bit stuck like it was, sit just a little bit, and you need to make sure that your spoon is hitting the edges of the cake tin and not the cake. The other way is to just tap it ever so gently. That's if you greased it the way I showed you to. That works. It doesn't work any other way, I'm afraid. And then that's ready to come out. That's literally just popping out, nice and clean. And that's our cake tin. And you've got all your edges, the whole cake, no other tricks. This is all that this is. And when I say the spoon should be hitting the tin, what I mean is, instead of doing that, you make sure you're doing that. The spoon is hitting the edges of the tin. And if it's a round edge like this one, it just means it doesn't, you know, pierce or cut into the cake. So we'll keep them in this position to cool. And then for storage, I often wrap them in cling film and tin foil over the cling film, just to keep it nice and airtight. Individually, don't wrap them in together because we want to keep the shape. And it helps them stay moist because nobody likes a dry cake. And that's it, my classic sponge cake. Look at that, how gorgeous is that? Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And I'll see you next time.